And now, Move the Sticks with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Move the Sticks. DJ here, and excited for this episode today because I've got a good friend that's going to join the show. It's Ken Coleman. He's been on before. If you're familiar with the name, it's because you are a big fan of his leadership work over the years. Really one of the industry leaders when it comes to leaders, business professionals. He's been helped in the finance world as well. He's got a great new show that's out. You can find it on YouTube. It is phenomenal. You can find the podcast as well. Front Row Seats. It's an interview style show, and Ken is, to me, the best interviewer that I've ever listened to. I've followed him for years and years and years. Entree Leadership was kind of his baby for a while, where he just brought on a business leader and have great conversations, and always learned not just a lot from the person he was interviewing, but learned a lot from him as an interviewer. And in scouting and in personnel work, it's a big part of it. You're trying to get to know the player, or get to know the person as well as the player. And a lot of that has to do with the interviews and the conversations that you have. So I wanted to bring Ken on to kind of go through what he's doing, what he's up to, and then also see if we can't learn a little bit more about the best ways to approach the interview process. And it's something that works in the business world as well as the sports world. Something I've always long been fascinated by. Bucky has as well. Bucky got crushed in some LA traffic today, so he was not able to get in for this conversation, which I know is going to bum him out. But I know he's going to enjoy listening to it, and I hope you do too. Here's my conversation with Ken Coleman. Well, Ken, I appreciate you taking some time for us today, man. It's something I've always treasured, our friendship, our conversations over the years, and I'm always fascinated to see where life has taken you and what you're getting into now. And I want to start this thing off, first of all, if you can just let everybody know what you've been working on and your special project you've got cranked up here.
Yeah, we just launched a new show. It's fun when you've been doing media as long as I've been doing it and having a show. And I'm on the Ramsey Network with Dave Ramsey, a co-host his show, which is now called The Ramsey Show. I've been doing that for several years. But we launched a new project that I've been really passionate about for a while. It's called Front Row Seat with Ken Coleman. And it's an interview show, but the difference between this format and every other interview show is I borrowed a page from one of my all-time favorite shows called Inside the Actor Studio on Bravo with James Lipton, the famed theater teacher. And he would bring in directors and producers and actors, and he would interview them in front of his class and then give the class the opportunity to ask questions. And it stuck in my mind that one day I'd like to be able to do that in the world of professional development and leadership development. And so we do it here in Nashville in our Ramsey studios, and we have a live audience, and they sit around us. It's very intimate, and they're a part of the conversation. They're not props. And that's something that has always mattered to me because I just believe so deeply in the power of a question, that asking questions and asking good questions is the key to unlocking everything we need to learn in life. And I think it's just one of the greatest personal growth, professional growth tactics that we can use is always be ready with the question. That wise person that you run into at the coffee shop, he's exited his company 25 years ago and he looks like some old dude who's just living his best life. Man, I'm going to meet that guy at the coffee shop. I'm going to talk to him and I'm going to have one question at least loaded up and ready to go because that guy's forgotten more about business than maybe I'll ever learn. It's that kind of thing. It's not just, having a show and a podcast. So the show's called Front Row Seat. We're doing deep dive conversations around three key areas: getting better personally, moving up professionally, and leading effectively. And DJ, those are really the three steps that I think you have to take to win as a professional. I know you got a professional audience, they love football, but getting better personally, I'm bringing a better version of me to work. So that's the physical. So I've got the energy, so I'm sleeping well, my health is good so that I'm bringing the best version of me to work. That's the emotional, the mental, the relational. If your personal life is on fire, I promise you it's coming to the office with you. And then the idea of spiritual growth as well. If that's something that you're intrigued by, we're going to have those conversations because we're talking about the whole person. And then, of course, moving up, we get it, hard skills, soft skills. And then at some point in the American workplace, if you're really doing well and you're getting better and you are moving up, you will move into a leadership role. And one of the tragedies in the American business place is we don't train people for leadership very well. We just promote them. And many times we'll take a stud salesperson and she or he, they don't want to move up. They want to crush it in sales. That's what they're great at. And we put them into a management or coaching role and they never want to coach. They may not be good at coaching, and yet we put them there. So those are the three things that we're discussing, and we're going deep dive, very specific, of course, in those three buckets: getting better, moving up, and leading well.
There's so many different fascinating areas I'd like to go with that, and I already had a couple things in the holster, and then as you kept going, I'm like, nope, I want to go in this in a different direction here. What you just said, I want to get your opinion on this. We see all the time, coach, you get hired to be a head coach, which is a job most people haven't held, right? They start out as a position coach, then they're a coordinator. And then that usually the popular coordinators, the successful coordinators, that's the pool of people we go to find head coaches. It's not always, especially in the NFL, you're not usually going to get a college coach. That's a rarity. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be someone who hasn't held that position at that level. So one of the biggest challenges they have is I'm an offensive coordinator. I've called plays. I've been successful, which has led to me getting a promotion in a new job with a new job description. And the majority of those guys will say, well, I'm going to continue to call plays because that's what I'm good at. And that's why I got this position. Whereas others will say, well, now I'm the head coach. I need to delegate that. And then I need to focus on the entire organization, the entire team here. What would be your advice to someone who's getting a head coaching job without head coaching experience in that regard?
Yeah, I think I'd stick with what you're really, really good at. In other
Mhm.
words, if you came to this position because of your play calling ability, whether that's on the defensive side or the offensive side, then I do believe you got to stick to that core strength because that's you at your best.
Mhm.
See, the leader is always the lid to the organization. And so when a leader hits his lid, I got bad news for you. The organization is going to hit its lid. So you go from being a great offensive coordinator and you go to being a head coach and you go, okay, I'm really good at calling plays. So I'm going to stick with that. But I've got all these other responsibilities. And for simplicity in the answer, let's say that there's 5 brand new big responsibilities
Mhm.
that you now have as a head coach that you didn't have as an OC. All right. In that case, you've got to look at that and go, okay, where do I have some natural strengths in these 5 new responsibilities? And boy, if there's a lot of administrative detail and I'm not naturally gifted there and I'm kind of a creative whiz, then I better get myself somebody, whether it's a personal assistant or I hire a coach who's really good operationally, and I create a position where they essentially are executing on those things, but getting my buy-in. I got to make the call, but I'm not going to do the work because I struggle in that area. I mean, that's what I think needs to happen on the corporate level, but certainly at the head coaching level. If I'm not good with people, if I'm not a great communicator,
Which there are guys like that who are geniuses, savants, in terms of looking at scheme, calling plays, but the interrelational aspect of being a head coach, not a strength.
I'll give you an example so I don't get you in trouble.
Yeah.
But I know this from my relationships in the NFL with players and coaches who coach with this guy. And I think the classic example of that is Mike Martz.
Mhm.
I don't know if that ever got to you, but the word
Oh,
I
yeah.
got was that Mike was an absolute wizard with calling plays, not very strong interpersonally. And I'm keeping that very nice and professional.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then you got to be aware of that and go, okay, who can run interference relationally with me? And so I begin to deputize key leaders and coaches who can fill that void with the team. And I, as head coach, stay in my strength zone. Now, that's very hard to do, but that's the true answer to your question. If you are somebody who's not been a head coach and you've got some limitations, you look at a guy like Dan Campbell. He stands out to me right now as a guy who just was born to be a head coach. I don't know anything about his X's and O's ability, but I know that he connects to grown men who are millionaires.
Mhm. No
And
question.
and so you go, okay, so it's incumbent on Dan Campbell to have an offensive coordinator whiz like he just did, and now he loses him to the Bears. He better fill that, and
Lost
stay
his
in his
defensive
lane.
coordinator to the Jets as
He
well.
lost both his coordinators.
Yeah.
So, okay, so, this is the question. Will the Lions be the same team? The head coach matters so much and the culture matters so much. However, you told me this once. You told me this once, and that kind of shocked me, actually. We were hanging out in a hotel lobby in Nashville once, hanging
Mhm.
out, and you said to me, you go, in the NFL, these guys don't care much about the rah-rah stuff. They just put me in the position to play well and
Mhm.
win. And that threw me off a little bit. I remember going, really? Because but I get what you're saying, and I have to take what you're saying at face value. But there's something about Dan Campbell, what he's done to create at least a positive culture, and these guys will play hard for him. Now he's got that in spades. But what he doesn't have, he's gonna have to surround himself with guys, and I think that's the key. And by the way, I'm just describing a CEO,
Mhm.
a really good CEO, a
100%.
level 5 leader that Jim Collins talks about in Good to Great. That's what I just described.
Yeah, to me, and it's you can talk about okay, it's a tactician or someone who's a motivator, the different leadership styles you might have in those positions. To me, it comes down to buy-in, whatever it is.
You
And
got
in
it.
order to get buy-in, you better be authentic because if you were someone who was the brainiac play caller without the personality and you come into the new position, we've seen it with the Bill Belichick tree for years and
Yeah,
years. The vast majority of those guys weren't successful. They're trying to be Belichick light, and that's not who they were.
that's right.
So to me, I think authenticity is a huge component there. I want to go back to what you're saying just a little bit earlier, talking about the importance of questions, because for we have a lot of people that listen to our show that are in personnel, whether that's in college personnel, helping with these college programs, which has now mimicked the NFL in terms of a personnel department, as well as a ton of NFL GMs, scouts, executives that listen to this thing. And one of the challenges I've always been fascinated with is the interview process with players. So you go to the combine, you get 10, 15 minutes with a guy. And I guess I'll open the floor to you of give me an example of a positive, of a effective, efficient way to use that time.
Yeah.
And then maybe on the other side of that, and I'll give you mine to just give you a heads up
Yeah.
on that. But
Well,
1 to 10 questions drive me insane.
yeah, I
Drive
agree.
me in on a scale of one. As soon as I hear on a scale of, I'm out. I'm
I
out on
agree.
that. So I'll give
I
you the
I can
floor.
tell you that I would probably start to itch if I sat in on those interviews, because that's what I do for a living. And,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna give you some advice to your audience that has nothing to do with the specifics that you're looking for, because I
Hmm.
don't know what you all are looking
Yeah.
for, but I really wanna add value to you, and I think this is gonna do it. And this is coming from a guy who's coached over 10,000 people live on the radio. Okay, so I've learned how to do professional coaching, and any coach seminar, any licensing or training you go through, they're gonna teach you this, and this is what I'm gonna give you. Stop asking why questions. Remove the word why at the beginning of any question. And so in your prep, next time you're interviewing a kid, whether it be in the college, you're just talking to a kid,
Hmm.
stop using the word why. Here's what we know from psychology, that it immediately puts that person on the defensive, and use a what question. Even hostage negotiators use this. Anytime you're tempted to ask a question and you would normally put the word why in it, and I'd go so far as to train yourself on this by putting an index card or something in front of you, a sticky note
Hmm.
when you go to these interviews and say, don't use the word why or no why. And then train your brain to go what? And it changes the question. I'll give you an example. Um, why um, are you having issues with all the girls you're dating? It keeps popping up.
Hmm.
Okay. You're going to put a kid on the defensive.
Hmm.
What you got to do is go, what do you see as some patterns in your life,
Mm.
that have gotten you into some stuff that I know you're not proud of and you want to grow through? What do you think's going on there? Now, I'm gonna tell you, that may not seem like a big difference, but it's a massive difference.
Mhm.
And just begin to watch people open up when you ask what. When you ask why, even the question itself becomes very pointed. But when you ask what, you take on this curiosity stance, which is what a question should be, and it essentially hands the ball back to that person, and they don't feel like they've got to answer and defend what you just said. I'm gonna tell you, I think that'd be the advice that I would give, and watch the responses become A, more honest, and B, rich. They're gonna be richer answers, and they're gonna give you, and so all professional coaches, if I'm doing a financial coaching session or if I'm doing a professional coaching session with a CEO,
Mhm.
DJ, I'm constantly asking what. CEO gives me an answer, then I go, "What?" And I keep following up with what. What makes you feel that way? What in your past do you think has influenced that? And man, you're 6 feet deep right now, and now you're getting to see the real person. And when you're evaluating talent, whether again, they're already in your college program and you're trying to figure out, should I put them on the field? Is their head where it needs to be for
Mhm.
Saturday? Man, I'm using what questions?
So I'm going to give you my favorite one that and I've been asking people about this for, 20 years, trying to figure out the best way to get a good answer, a usable, learnable answer from these players as they're coming through the process. So this is my favorite one that I've heard over the years, is what does a successful rookie season look like for you?
Beautiful.
And you'll be amazed. That seems like a very simple question. You'll be amazed what you can learn from that
That's right.
from two different levels here. The first thing is you'll see guys who think team first, and you'll see guys who think individually first. Because you'll hear guys say, "What is a successful rookie year?" Well, we're gonna have a winning season. We're gonna win the division. We're gonna go to the playoffs and win a Super Bowl. That's what is a success to me. Then you're gonna have other people say, "What a successful year to me is I'm gonna have growth." They'll talk about how I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna be better in game one than I was in the preseason. I'm gonna be better week 8, and I'm gonna just continue to get better throughout my rookie year. I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna grow. And then you'll hear other people who give a very simple answer of, "I'm going to be the rookie of the year. I'm
Yeah,
going to, I'm
right.
going to go to the Pro Bowl." And I'm not saying that that's completely wrong, but I'm saying you're going to learn a lot about the wiring of the player when you just
You
ask that
just
simple question.
described that so beautifully because you're gonna get 2 very different answers. Here's one that I would use. I love to give samples, and
Hmm.
your audience could reject this one, but listening to you talk, it made me think of something. Here's a really fun question for evaluating NFL talent.
Hmm.
I'd ask them, "What questions, ideally, is the media asking you
Ah.
after a game on Sunday?" Make them think, first of all, because they gotta think through that. And what I just did to them there was I'm taking them to post-game, and they're sitting in front of the media, and the media is asking them questions, and you're making them really dig there by going, "What are the ideal questions? What questions do you wanna hear from the media
Hmm.
based on your performance on Sundays?" Now, that makes a kid think, first of all. And to your point, it's gonna reveal some depth. I wanna hear a kid say, you know, uh "You just were all over the field today.
Hmm.
What supplements are you taking?" I want them to be creative, because I got so much juice on the field and I'm everywhere, and the announcers were calling my name all day long, that you want them saying. So that's a creative way to make a kid actually think. And so, fun thing there, they don't have to be great at the answer right away, but I'll tell you, the ones that can quickly get there and give you some great answers, 2 things are going on. One, they got some character. There's some character revealed in the answer,
Hmm.
but the ones that are quick on their feet, that kind of a question is gonna reveal the kids that can actually process information pretty quickly, I would think. I could be
Hmm.
wrong on that, but take them to a scenario and make them process a scenario.
Hmm. I like that. One of the things we've always talked about with quarterbacks, and I'm curious if this carries over into the business world and on a leadership scale. We've found over the years that recall has been important with quarterbacks.
Yep.
So if I can ask you, hey, we always tell the story about Patrick Mahomes. When Patrick Mahomes came in the studio 2 weeks before the draft, and there was questions about Mahomes, I had them. Bucky did as well about, okay, he kind of played reckless at Texas Tech. Footwork was kind of all over the place. This is just this wild stallion with this huge arm. And you're kind of like, I don't know what do I make of this? Nobody from this system's really been successful at the next level, but man, he's got all these tools. And we brought him in just before the draft. And I remember saying, TCU, week 3, third quarter, you guys are driving. Do you remember, how that ended, what that drive looked like? He gave me the play call, the coverage they were in, the read that he made. It told me everything about the whole process. And and for some reason, and I don't know the exact answer, I just feel like some of it is, you know, being successful in the NFL is about a Rolodex. It's just a Rolodex of experiences, and then being able to call back and rely on those experiences. Think about, the great all-timers, and this is in any sport. Usually what happens is you gain your wisdom and your knowledge and your experience. That goes up while your talent level and athleticism goes down. But there's a sweet spot in there where they're both meet. And that's where you get Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, LeBron James, Michael Jordan, where that experience and the athleticism is still there. And I think with technology changes and training changes, you're seeing guys able to hang in that zone longer than they ever have before.
Mhm.
But to me, recall, that Rolodex of information is very valuable.
Yeah, and, that right there is an example of You know that. So if you're listening to the show, you just heard what DJ said. So now you're coming up with really unique questions
Mhm.
to see if we got good, strong recall. And now you're designing an interview that is very, very specific. We know this from the corporate world, DJ, and this is back to your initial focus here on questions for talent evaluation. We know in the corporate world that it's the number one thing that bosses hate is doing job interviews. So they kind of make it up as they go along.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that scouts are doing that or GMs. I'm
Well, they
not
don't have
saying that.
direction. A lot of them have never we've
Well,
been taught what a 3 technique looks like when he gets up the field and the
right.
explosiveness and how fluid he is and can you flip
Yeah.
your hips. But for the most part and they'll say, "You need to go spend time, interview this player, talk to the" they've never taught them how to interview.
Well,
That's not their fault.
that's right. Well, see, that shocks me. And so I'm going to tell you something right now. I'm so glad you revealed that. If you take anything away from this podcast, and I hope we're adding value to you folks, but if you get nothing else, become a great question asker because that sounds like you now have a massive advantage in talent assessment and really figuring out because people aren't teaching how to ask questions. By the way, Harvard has got data on this that it's in the low 90% of all bad hires happen as a result of the interview process.
Wow.
So this is to me, if you're a talent evaluator and you're listening and watching this, become a great question asker. It's going to give you a absolute distinct advantage because you're going to learn stuff that other people don't learn.
How do you quantify things? This is something we talked about last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. But we know of two teams, and we don't want to mention the teams to put them on Front Street. But it was us. It was fascinating because to give you a little a glimpse on the scouting side of things, you'll go through and you'll have, and when you're writing up a player inside your computer, you'll have position specific notes. So it'd be like a corner and have all the different traits that you look for, and we would write comments in there. And then you'd have your summary. So you'd write, a paragraph plus on the player to give the whole way we were taught, going back 20 years ago. And the way it's always been done is that we're going to paint a picture for everybody. So when you're in the room and you hear us read our report, you're going to, even if you haven't seen the player, you're going to know what he looks like based off how we write it. But these two teams, and one of which has been very successful in the NFL, are no longer writing reports. They are dragging and dropping. So they have a list of like terms and descriptors, but they've been able to attach kind of a number system to that. So when you're writing your report, they're just taking from that bank and putting it over here. And then what they've done is now they have data over a long period of time. Like for instance, I'll just make something up here, corners that struggle to tackle. Well, that's been tagged now. So they can go back through and look and say, well, there's a strong correlation between corners who don't tackle in college that they are going to have a hard time in the NFL, or maybe there's no correlation at all. But they're able to take all this data from these reports now, and they're able to quantify things and say these are the important factors. These ones not so much. This is a good idea of what this should look like for a successful player. Can you do that in the business world? And do you believe in this little shift in philosophy here?
You can't do that in the business world because you
Yeah,
don't have all that data. You don't have
that's true.
you don't have combines.
Yeah.
The best you have is
Well,
a
you have spreadsheets and performance, I guess, from your companies, but I don't know what
yeah,
that
but
means for you.
if you're talking about hiring somebody,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so if you're talking about in the context you just asked me, they're talking about drafting somebody. If you're talking about hiring somebody or signing a free agent, in the corporate world, the best you have is a resume and some references, right?
Mhm.
Now, once they come to work for you, you can start measuring things.
But could you do core key areas? Like, could you say
Yes,
when you're interviewing somebody and say, "Hey, these are the 12 factors that we believe make a great employee, and if you don't score
100%.
higher than this on the interview process, we're not going to bring you into the building."
Yes. Now to that, absolutely. And so there, um, you can do it, and I think that it's helpful to do it. Uh, but what I would focus on is I'd have okay, let's talk about culture stuff. Are they
Mhm.
going to fit on the
Mhm.
team that we're looking at putting them on? Let's look at values and stuff like that to see if they're a culture fit. I would look at obviously skill set. You got to be super and you got to know it.
Mhm.
You got to have ways of testing that in the interview so you know you're not being lied to. And I'm a big fan of letting somebody do a half day's worth of work or something like that, or come up with a way to do that. And let's see if they're an actor
Mhm.
or if they can produce. Um, but I would say, as I heard you talk about that, the only thing I would always have a fail safe. I'm going to call it a fail safe for lack of a
Mhm.
better word. I think sometimes we quantify too much system stuff and we can miss the diamond in the rough, if you will.
Mhm.
You know, you could look at, well, they didn't have this, they didn't have this, and this, but I'd want to go, okay, but man, we're looking at them. Why are we looking at them? What are we missing? And I would have some type of system to go, is there anything that we're missing here that explains why the quantifiable data isn't matching up? In other words, was the kid a good tackler in high school, but he wasn't a good
Mm.
tackler in college?
Was he hurt?
Yeah, was he hurt? I'll give you a real personal example. My son, my son is an absolute ball hawk. He's gonna be a senior,
Mhm.
and over his career, he's had one coach that I'm thinking of, who crapped on his spirit.
Mhm.
And by the way, full disclosure, I'm not the parent that goes in during the season and has the talk. Not the guy at
You don't
all.
have the coach on speed dial?
Do not. It never works, first of
Yeah.
all. And then I honored my son's. But here's my point: we did meet after the season, and the question was posed to me,
Mhm.
and I pointed out, um, what you're looking at as a lack of effort is not a lack of effort.
Mhm.
I'm gonna tell you what it is, because I've raised the kid. I
Mhm.
know him, and I've not called you, have I? No, you didn't at all. No emails. No, no emails. I said, I'm gonna tell you what happened. You need to go ask him about this moment and this moment and this moment, and I'm gonna tell you what happened. Yes, it was a lack of effort, but you're focused on the lack of effort instead of figuring out what happened to the kid's spirit.
Mhm.
You will not get effort from a kid with a crushed spirit.
Mhm.
So that's one kind of example to go, if we feel like the kid's got a shot, but it doesn't look like it's adding up over here and all these fancy quantifiables,
Yeah.
I want to go, is there something there that just we coach that, we lead that, and we turn the dial up? That would be, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just think if you get so hung up on principles, you forget that this is a people business. And I think that plays in the NFL, college, and I also think it plays in the corporate world. Don't
Yeah.
get so reliant on your principles that you forget there are some people elements here that could change the principles.
Yeah, I think we've seen an emphasis on that more so over the last couple of years, where some of the best teams have shrunk their draft boards. They've eliminated a lot of people because they're focused on, these are the 60 people who fit, and
Mhm.
within those 60 people, we got to find 7 players that we can draft that are gonna, that are coming here and be successful. But they have made the commitment, and I know one specifically who's one of the best run organizations in the NFL. We are just simply not going to miss on the person. We will forgive ourselves if we miss on the player. We're not going to miss on the person, on the
Mm.
wiring, on the makeup, and all those things. So we're going to
Love
shrink our
that.
pool, and those are the guys we're going to select from. And they've got adults. They've got a bunch of adults in the room. This group has focused a lot more on players who have been in college, stay like 4 years. You can stay, shoot, some of them 7 years now, but a lot of 4-year guys. So maybe a red shirt, maybe they played 3, came after the junior year, but 4 years in college, guys who've competed in the Senior Bowl. So in an era where everybody's sitting out games and doesn't want, these guys just love to compete, so they want to go compete, and they compete the Senior Bowl. Maybe they've even gone through the whole combine process and haven't backed away from that. But there's just a lot of different factors that they've figured out, quite honestly, that these are the right people. And within that, you're still going to miss because it's imperfect. You're going to
Yeah,
miss on some
that's right.
players, but they've just made it their goal that, hey, we'll miss on players here and there. We're not going to strike out on the person as much as we have in the past.
See, I love that. I'll just say this real quick again for your audience, trying to give your audience something here for you all that are in talent evaluating and you're coaching kids. This may be cheesy, but if I were in the coaching business or if I was in the talent GM world,
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for the stars because you got to rank all that stuff because I got to be able to play, especially on Sunday. But I'd want to know, I'd have a heart scale. Like, all right,
Mm-hmm.
he's a 5-star, but what's his heart? And I'm talking about character, spirit, the juice. As this kid got crazy levels of grit,
Mm-hmm.
I I would have a scale on the people side, and I'd call it heart. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd go, he's a 5-star player, a 2-heart player. That's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Now we look at it and go, why is he a 2-heart? If he was coached poorly in college and he had some megalomaniac position coach who screamed at him, And his dad screamed at him growing up, "No, I'm serious, and there's a
Mhm.
wound there.
Oh,
And
yeah.
wait a second. And now if I draft this kid and put my arm around him
Mhm.
and give him affirmation that he's never had before, we got ourselves a 5 heart." So I I just think, and again, I know it's limited and all this
Yeah.
kind of stuff and the time people have, but I do believe in what you just said. I think that organization, they're gonna win in the long run because, and again, I hate to say this, but everybody talks about Tom Brady,
Mhm.
but I don't know what everybody missed with that kid. We don't know. I don't know. I've never actually sat and listened to anybody who scouted him back then. I wish I had. I'm biased. I'm a Michigan guy. But I mean, he didn't have a whole lot of quantifiables apparently. But
Yeah,
did he?
100%, yeah.
But did he? I mean, did he develop an arm? Did he develop an accuracy? Did he develop recall after he got to the NFL, or did he already have it? What is your take?
Well, to me, everything got accentuated. I do think his arm got stronger as he got to the NFL, and you saw his part of his thing was you had the Drew Henson factor at Michigan, so he's in and out of the lineup there. He's always looking to, he's going to be replaced. Then you have he gets sick, goes to the combine, looks thin, he's not, it doesn't look great from that
Right.
standpoint. So that
Right.
spring didn't go well for him.
Yeah.
But then, to me, I think with Tom Brady, we did a whole thing on this when I was with the Ravens. We did a whole study on him in the early 2000s once he started to pop. And I had not scouted when he was. I think we're actually the same age, but I had not been in the NFL when he came into the NFL. So it was interesting to sit in there and see. And when you read through the people's reports that had gone in there, there was a lot of it. A lot of the good stuff was was hidden inside there, and you saw things. Which for me, my Tom Brady is Brock Purdy, where
Yeah.
Brock Purdy is the last pick of the draft. He's Mr. Irrelevant, and people can say, where does he stack up? Is he top 10? Is he top 15? Is wherever you want to say. The guy's been probably the greatest success story in NFL draft history. Is nobody's been the last pick of the draft and gone,
right.
done what he's done as a Super Bowl quarterback and someone who just got whatever $250 million. But when I went and called Iowa State and called Matt Campbell, their head coach, after his first year playing, and I said, Coach, what did I miss on this guy? Because when I watched him, I saw average size, average arm strength, maybe a little bit above average athleticism. Like statistically, he was accurate, but it didn't jump off the numbers didn't jump off the page that way. And he goes, DJ, he is the most competitive practice player I have ever coached. He's a maniac competitor. So that was the one piece of that. So that filled in a little bit of that circle for me. Then I got a chance to spend a lot of time with Brock and asked him, I said, hey, was I taking crazy pills? Because when I was watching you, I didn't like your arm strength was a question for me, and he said, when I finished playing, I had that spring to get ready for the draft, and I got his personal coaches, and they're like, you have worked too hard. You're too muscled up. You need to lose weight. You need to be a little more elastic. So he took that advice and that coaching. It limbered him up. It loosened him up. He ended up getting more velocity on the ball. He was just everything about him was more smooth and more natural. But so then this is kind of completing the puzzle. And my takeaway was this, Ken: if you have somebody who has enough ability and they are maniacal workers, they're incredibly intelligent, and they will not be denied. You bet on those guys all day long.
I
They're going to
agree.
figure it out. And that's the
Yes.
same thing with
No.
Tom Brady. He's a maniac competitor, a psycho.
Mhm.
He's a psychopath.
Yeah.
And those guys are the guys that you just say, he'll figure it out.
That's right. I couldn't agree more. And by the way, that's a lesson for corporate America too. That's just the hunger. Pat Lencioni, Pat's
Yeah.
become a dear friend, lives 2 streets over from me now here in Franklin, Tennessee. And Pat and I talked about this one time when he came out with the book, The Ideal Team Player, which has been a runaway success. And he talks about humble, hungry, and people smart are the
Yep.
3 characteristics. He says smart, but what he means is not intelligence. He means like people smart. But we
Mhm.
talked about the hunger thing, and I was interviewing him. I said, Pat, I have an opinion on this, but I want to ask you first. I said, can you teach hunger? And he went, nope. And I went, I agree. Like, it's not teachable.
Yep.
You either
I agree
have
with
it or
that.
you don't. Do you agree with that? When you see players?
100%. 100%. I agree with it. And it's in their wiring, and it's, you can use makeup, wiring, DNA, whatever term you want to use with guys. But there's something different, and it's hard to describe, but you know it when you see it.
That's
And that goes
100%.
back to your point about some things can't be quantifiable. I saw it in the players that I've been around. If you were to just go size up Ed Reed, with all the different safeties in the NFL, and if you just did a lineup and looked at him, you're like, who is this guy? Well, he's just maybe the best safety of all time.
Yeah.
If you took Ray Lewis and put him in a lineup with linebackers, he wouldn't look anything out of the ordinary. but they are incredible competitors. Every great player I've ever been around had that trait,
You
and
know
they
who I
make
think of?
others better. They make others better around them.
I think the hungriest player I've ever in my life laid eyes on, and I had the privilege of being his booking agent
Mm.
20 some years ago. Mike Singletary. Hungriest,
Oh yeah,
not a particularly big guy. Yeah.
yeah.
You saw the hunger.
Oh
To
yeah.
use your word, psychopath when he was on the field.
I worked with him.
Gentle. Yeah, that's
He was our
right.
linebackers. This is I'll give you a great Mike Singletary story. So he gets hired as our linebacker coach. We already have the best defense in the league. Ray Lewis has been the defensive player of the year. Ray Lewis has won the Super Bowl and Super Bowl MVP. Like, our defense is being discussed as one of the all-time great defenses in NFL history. So Singletary comes in to be the linebackers coach. And he's not just Ray Lewis. We've got a room full of studs in there. And he's got out there, like the cage or like the bars, so you'd have to stay low, like going through them, like in the 70s and 80s. We've got that thing out there, and I mean,
Oh,
we an
geez.
individual before we get to like team, he is running these guys and training them like it's Jack Lambert like level stuff, and like they had to tell like, hey coach, like these guys are already in shape. Like we don't need to
Yeah.
kill these guys in individual. We have the best defense in the league. Let's just teach them what to do and keep
Yeah.
them
He's Coach
healthy. So
Boone from
yeah,
Remember the Titans.
yes. But that was his
That's great.
way of doing it. It was always
That's
going to
funny.
be all
Yeah.
hard 100% of the time. But
Yeah.
hey, Ken, you've been generous with your time. I'm gonna end on this one last question,
Okay.
and I'll let you run. If you were going to hire a college head coach. We've talked a lot about the NFL. If you're going to hire a college head coach, and the landscape has changed a lot, and it's NIL and transfer portal, all those things. Give me a couple traits you would look for that will lead to at least a probability of success in an ever-changing landscape in college football.
Man, that is a great question. A couple of
Because
traits.
I'm fast, I'll give you this little tip here,
I've
or
got a
this little
couple of traits.
guiding point. I am fascinated in talking. I talk to college coaches all the time. And when I used to talk about recruiting and what do you look for, and I'm trying to learn, always trying to learn and grow there. My thing I am fascinated with is retention.
Yeah.
How are you going to keep your players no longer playing offense anymore? You got to play defense with the guys already in your building. What is the key to retention
Yeah.
in a world where these guys are scattered all over the globe?
That's where I was headed. I'm going to give you two for shortness of time.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I personally believe on this one. I think here's how I'll set it up. There's a difference between coaching men and young men.
Yeah.
And now we've got young men. And I was on the phone with an assistant AD at the school that I think is on your shirt right there.
There we go, Baylor.
Yeah. And he was telling me we were talking about the finances of these young people.
Mm-hmm.
And he was getting my thoughts on, we got to coach these kids on how to handle their money. They're millionaires now. And so we were talking about the financial piece.
Mm-hmm.
And that accentuates this point. Number one, they're young men. Their frontal lobes are not fully developed. They are not a 28-year-old, 30-year-old pro. They are 18-year-old millionaires who have been treated like the Prince of Egypt, most of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our context for these two traits. So I think number one, you got to have discernment. And I do think this is a skill that can be developed. I think you can take classes on it. I think you can learn how to really ask good questions like we've been talking about. But you better develop the ability to read young men. I mean, read them. They may say one thing, but you better be able to figure out what's going on underneath. And the ability to be discerning is huge. The second thing is the ability to build trust. And I think these two go hand in hand. You're going to have to be discerning on the front end to be able to ask the questions, to be able to pay attention, to talk to their position coaches, to meet them outside the football field. You're going to have to get your eyes on them and really read them and see what's going on with them. And then to that level, as you begin to ask questions and relate with them, then they will begin to trust you. But I think if you're a great reader of people and a great trust builder, those would be the two traits that I would want to start with. Because you can call plays, you can win the living room. There's plenty of guys like that. But to your point, if retention is the game, and I think it is until this landscape changes, I think those would be two of the most important traits. Can I read people well, really read these kids and be so tuned in, get my antenna up And then can I build trust with them? Because if they trust you, they're going to stay with you. The really good ones are going to the league, whether they play for you or somebody else.
Mhm.
That's the reality. So if you want to keep them, you're going to keep them because they trust you. They've been told they're great their whole life. They got pressure to take care of their family. They got pressure from the media. You guys know all the things. But to the extent that you can read them and build trust with them, I think that gives you the edge on retention.
That is a phenomenal way to wrap this thing up, man, because it is, to me, I think there's real advantages to be had out there. And it's not just who has the deepest pocketbook in a world where every day you're looking to see who was able to reel one in. We don't ever see the headlines of who was able to keep one in the fold. And I think that might be what's more important in terms of the teams that are going to ultimately get the big prize out there is not only who you go out and get, but who you hold on to, who do you keep. So great advice from Ken there. I hope you guys have enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. I know I kept you a little bit long there, Ken, but you are you're one of my favorites, man. I appreciate your friendship, and I always take pages full of notes when we get a chance to get together. I appreciate you, buddy.
Well, I appreciate you. You're the best in the business. ESPN better back up a Brinks truck to you because you're the best there is.
They might be buying it. Who knows? They might be buying the whole network. I don't know
I
what's
know,
going
I
on.
heard that.
Crazy
But
times.
I just think you're the best there is. Your preparation, your kindness, and also I want to brag to your audience of what a true gentleman and true great man, husband, and father you are behind the scenes. He's not just a whiz with his ability to discern. You got the gift of discernment. And it's been very obvious as you've shined on the draft coverage. That's not just preparation. You do have discernment. And I appreciate you too, bro. Anytime. I love talking leadership of football and culture on stuff like this. I don't get to do these podcasts as much as I'd like. So it's always fun to be with you.
You're the best. I know everybody enjoyed this as much as I have. I appreciate you guys hanging with us, and we'll see you next time right here on Move the Sticks.